The galaxy trembled as Earth's battleship entered the star's commander. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the swirling vortex of hyperspace collapse into pinpricks of distant stars. After 300 years of isolation following the Great Silence, humanity was finally returning to the galactic stage. What they found waiting for them would shake the very foundations of known space. The massive dreadnought emerged from its jump with the grace of a predator. At 12 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that defied conventional physics, the Indomitable represented the pinnacle of human engineering. Its hull, forged from metamaterials that bend light around its edges, seemed to drink in the starlight rather than reflect it. Along its flanks, railguns the size of skyscrapers tracked potential threats with mechanical precision. "Navigation, confirm our position," Chen ordered, her voice cutting through the bridge's tense atmosphere. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each member a veteran of humanity's long struggle to survive in a universe that had tried to exterminate them. "Confirmed, Commander. We're at the edge of the Zirian system, coordinates match our target destination perfectly." Lieutenant Torres' hands danced across holographic displays that materialized around his station. "Long-range sensors are picking up. Well, this is interesting." Chen turned from the main viewscreen, her cybernetic eye automatically adjusting its focus to read the data streaming across Torres' displays. What she saw made her blood run cold, then hot with anger. "Ma'am, I'm reading 17 different fleet signatures in this system. The energy outputs suggest everything from Zephyrian dreadnoughts to Corvani battleswarms. And they're all heading toward the fourth planet. The fourth planet of the Zirian system held special significance for humanity. 3 centuries ago, it had been the site of New Geneva, a thriving human colony of 40 million souls. It was also where the Galactic Concordat had made their intentions clear by glassing the entire surface from orbit, leaving nothing but radioactive sand where cities once stood. "Time to weapons range?" Chen asked, though she already knew the answer would displease her. "At current acceleration, approximately 14 hours, ma'am." "But, Commander." Torres hesitated, his dark eyes meeting hers with concern. The fleet compositions we're seeing, they're not fighting each other. They're working together. This was unprecedented. The Galactic Concordat had been humanity's greatest enemy, but even they had been a fractious alliance of species that could barely cooperate long enough to coordinate attacks. The idea of 17 different alien civilizations working in perfect harmony was not just surprising, it was terrifying. "Tactical analysis, Mr. Park," Chen said, turning to her weapons officer. Lieutenant Commander James Park had survived the siege of Titan and the desperate fighting in the asteroid belt. If anyone could make sense of an impossible military situation, it was him. Park's scarred hands moved across his console with the precision of a surgeon. Holographic displays bloomed around him, showing ship classifications, weapon signatures, and tactical formations in 3-dimensional detail. His expression grew increasingly grim as the data compiled. "Ma'am, based on the energy signatures and formation patterns, I'm looking at roughly 800 vessels of various classes. The good news is that most of them are older generation ships, the kind we were fighting 300 years ago. The bad news is that there are some signatures I don't recognize at all." "Unknown technology?" "Unknown everything, ma'am. These ships are operating on principles that our sensors can't fully analyze. Energy outputs that shouldn't be possible, movement patterns that violate known physics, and weapon signatures that." He paused, running the calculations again. "Commander, some of these vessels are generating more power than a small star." Chen felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders like a lead blanket. The Indomitable was powerful, perhaps the most powerful single vessel humanity had ever constructed, but it was still just one ship. Even with its advanced weapons and defensive systems, it couldn't hope to engage 800 enemy vessels and survive. "Communications, any response to our standard hails?" Ensign Martinez, barely out of the academy but already showing the steel that marked the best of humanity's new generation, shook her head. "Nothing on any frequency, ma'am. But I am picking up significant chatter between the alien fleets. The universal translator is having trouble with some of the languages, but what it can parse suggests they're excited about something." "Excited?" Chen raised an eyebrow. In her experience, alien civilizations became excited about 2 things, new technology to steal or new species to exterminate. Given humanity's history with the galaxy, she suspected she knew which category they fell into. Yes, ma'am. The computer is flagging multiple references to the return and the completion of the circle. There are also repeated mentions of something called the final protocol. The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of life support systems and the occasional chirp of monitoring equipment. Chen had heard whispers of the final protocol during the war, fragments of intercepted communications that intelligence had never been able to fully decode. The prevailing theory had been that it was some kind of ultimate weapon, a last resort that the Concordat would use if they felt truly threatened. "Ma'am," Torres called out, his voice tight with tension. "I'm detecting a massive energy buildup from the planet's surface. Something big is powering up down there." The main viewscreen shifted to show the fourth planet in enhanced detail. Where New Geneva had once stood, a massive structure now dominated the landscape. It was clearly artificial, rising from the planet's surface like a metallic mountain. Energy cascaded along its sides in patterns too complex to follow, and, at its peak, something that looked disturbingly like a weapon was taking shape. "Estimated time to full charge?" Chen asked. "Based on the power curve, approximately 12 hours, ma'am." Chen's mind raced through possibilities. Whatever the aliens were building on New Geneva's grave, they clearly didn't want humanity to interfere. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. 17 fleets arriving just as the Indomitable emerged from hyperspace suggested that humanity's return had been anticipated. Options, people. I need tactical assessments and strategic recommendations in 10 minutes. The bridge crew threw themselves into their work with the intensity that had kept humanity alive through 3 centuries of isolation. Holographic displays materialized throughout the command center, showing everything from weapons loadouts to potential escape routes. The soft glow of the displays cast strange shadows on faces marked by determination and barely controlled anger. Park was the first to report back. "Ma'am, I've run preliminary combat simulations assuming our current weapons loadout and estimated enemy capabilities. The results are not encouraging." Specifics, Lieutenant Commander. "In a straight fight, we might be able to destroy between 50 and 70 enemy vessels before being overwhelmed. The unknown technology ships are the wild card. They could either be paper tigers or they could vaporize us with the first shot." Torres looked up from his navigation console. "I've plotted 17 different escape routes, ma'am. We could withdraw to the edge of the system and call for reinforcements from Earth." "How long for reinforcements to arrive?" "Minimum of 6 weeks, ma'am. The nearest battle group is in the Centauri system, and they'd need time to organize a response." Shen stared at the image of the structure rising from New Geneva's poisoned soil. "In 6 weeks, whatever the aliens were building would be completed." The sight of it filled her with a cold rage that had been building for 300 years. Humanity had spent 3 centuries developing new weapons, new tactics, and new technologies while hiding in the depths of their own solar system. They had emerged stronger, harder, and angrier than ever before. But, most importantly, they had emerged united. "Ensign Martinez, open a channel to Earth Command. Maximum encryption, fastest possible transmission." "Channel open, ma'am." "Earth Command, this is Commander Chen aboard the Indomitable. We have arrived at the Zirian system and encountered significant hostile forces attempting to activate an unknown weapon system on the former site of New Geneva. Request immediate support and authorization for Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was humanity's designation for total warfare: no prisoners, no quarter, no mercy. It was the protocol that had been authorized exactly once in human history, on the day the Concordat had destroyed New Geneva and declared humanity a threat to galactic stability. The response came back in less than 2 minutes, transmitted across impossible distances by quantum entanglement communicators that existed in violation of everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics. Indomitable *, this is Admiral Harrison. Protocol 7 is authorized. You are weapons free on all hostile targets. Additional assets are being deployed to your location, but you are to consider yourself the tip of the spear. Show them what humanity has learned in the dark. Make them remember why they were afraid." Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Around her, the bridge crew straightened with purpose. They had trained for this moment, dreamed of it during the long years of isolation. Humanity had been forced to retreat once, but they would never retreat again. Mr. Park, bring all weapons systems online. Full combat load, maximum yield on all ordnance. Aye, ma'am. Weapons coming online now. Throughout the ship's vast hull, systems that had never been tested in actual combat began their deadly activation sequences. Plasma cannons capable of burning through a moon's crust extended from hidden ports. Missile launchers loaded with warheads that could crack continents cycled through their targeting solutions. And, deep in the ship's core, the most terrible weapon humanity had ever devised began its slow, careful startup sequence. Navigation, plot a course for the planet. Maximum acceleration, direct approach. Ma'am, that will put us directly through the alien fleet formations. I'm counting on it, Lieutenant. As the Indomitable began its acceleration toward the inner system, alarms began sounding throughout the alien fleets. For 300 years, they had ruled the galaxy without challenge, secure in the knowledge that humanity had been broken beyond repair. The sudden appearance of a single human vessel should have been nothing more than an annoyance, easily dealt with by overwhelming force. But, as the sleek predator that was the Indomitable began its approach, something primal and ancient stirred in the collective consciousness of the galactic concordat. They remembered, however, dimly, why their ancestors had been so determined to exterminate humanity rather than simply conquer them. Humans, they had learned too late, did not break. They adapted. And, when they adapted, they became something more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Enemy fleets are moving to intercept, Torres reported. I count 43 vessels breaking formation and moving to engage us. Good, Chen replied. That's 43 fewer ships defending whatever they're building. The first shots of humanity's return to the galactic stage were fired 18 minutes later. A Zephyrian battlecruiser, confident in its superiority, opened fire with particle beams that could have carved apart an asteroid. The beams struck the Indomitable's hull and simply disappeared, absorbed by metamaterials that converted the energy into additional power for the ship's own weapons. The human response was immediate and devastating. A railgun that had taken 50 years to perfect fired a projectile at a significant fraction of light speed. The tungsten-depleted uranium core, accelerated by magnetic fields that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, struck the Zephyrian vessel amidships. The alien cruiser simply ceased to exist, vaporized by an impact that released more energy than some stellar explosions. The galaxy, which had spent 3 centuries forgetting about humanity's capacity for violence, was about to receive a very unpleasant reminder. But Chen's attention was not on the battle beginning to rage around her ship. Her eyes remained fixed on the structure rising from New Geneva's grave, and the terrible purpose it represented. Whatever the aliens were building, whatever the final protocol was meant to accomplish, it would not be allowed to succeed. Humanity had returned to the stars, and, this time, they would not be denied their vengeance. The Indomitable pressed deeper into the alien fleet formation, its weapons systems cycling through targets with mechanical precision. Each shot was carefully calculated for maximum psychological impact as well as tactical effectiveness. The aliens needed to understand that the species they had tried to exterminate had returned stronger, angrier, and infinitely more dangerous than before. Behind the ship's sleek hull, Commander Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The galaxy had trembled once when Earth's children first reached for the stars. It had celebrated when those children were seemingly broken and driven back into hiding. Now it would tremble again, but, this time, the trembling would not stop. The galaxy trembled as Earth's battleship entered the stars. The alien fleet's response to the destruction of the Zephyrian cruiser was swift and overwhelming. 43 vessels converged on the Indomitable from multiple vectors, their weapons systems lighting up the void with deadly purpose. Commander Chen watched the tactical display with the cold calculation of a predator evaluating prey. Incoming fire, multiple sources, Park announced. Plasma streams, particle beams, and something new, some kind of gravitational weapon that's trying to compress our hull. Defensive systems to maximum. Show me what 300 years of human engineering can do. The Indomitable's hull shimmered as its defensive fields activated. The first wave of alien fire struck what appeared to be empty space several hundred meters from the ship's actual position. Holographic projectors, working in concert with gravitational lenses, created a false image while the real vessel moved through space like a ghost. The gravitational weapon proved more troublesome. Chen felt the ship shudder as exotic forces attempted to crush the hull like an aluminum can. Emergency systems activated automatically, deploying fields that Chen's weapons officer had assured her would work in theory. The theory proved correct, barely. Hull integrity holding at 92%, reported Chief Engineer Walsh over the communication system. But, I wouldn't recommend taking another hit like that. Noted. Mr. Park, return fire. Let's see how they handle our new toys. The Indomitable's response was a demonstration of human ingenuity applied to the problem of killing things efficiently. Instead of the massive railgun that had vaporized the first target, Park selected something more subtle. A missile launcher opened along the ship's flank, releasing what appeared to be a standard nuclear warhead. The aliens recognized the threat and moved to intercept it with point defense systems. Particle beams lanced out to destroy the primitive human weapon before it could reach its target. The beams struck the missile and activated its true function. The warhead wasn't nuclear, it was something far more exotic. Human scientists, working in the deep laboratories beneath Luna's surface, had spent decades studying the fundamental forces that held matter together. They had learned to make those forces optional. The missile exploded not in nuclear fire, but in a cascade of quantum dissolution that spread through local spacetime like a virus. The three ships that had fired on it simply stopped existing in any meaningful sense. Their atoms forgot how to maintain coherence, and they dissolved into component particles that drifted apart like smoke. Quantum dissolution warhead functioning within parameters, Park reported with satisfaction. Shall I deploy the dimensional shredders next? Save those for the capital ships. Standard railguns for everything else. The battle settled into a rhythm that would have been familiar to naval commanders from humanity's ancient past. The Indomitable was outnumbered but possessed superior individual firepower and defensive capabilities. Chen maneuvered her vessel like a frigate captain from the Age of Sail, using speed and superior gunnery to avoid being overwhelmed by numbers. But her attention remained divided between the immediate tactical situation and the larger strategic picture. On the planet's surface, the alien construction was approaching completion. Energy readings were climbing toward levels that made her ship's weapons look like toys in comparison. Ensign Martinez, any progress on decoding the alien communications? Some, ma'am. The computer has managed to parse more of their language matrices. They're definitely coordinating the defense of whatever they're building, but there are references to something else. Something about the human contamination and cleansing protocols. Chen's blood chilled. The Galactic Concordat had always viewed humanity as a contamination, a species whose very existence somehow threatened the natural order of the galaxy. 300 years ago, they had believed that glassing human colonies and blockading Earth would be sufficient to contain the threat. Now it seemed they had prepared a more permanent solution. Time estimate until their weapon is fully charged? 8 hours, ma'am. But, Commander, I'm detecting something else. There are additional energy signatures coming online all across the system. This isn't the only facility they've built. The tactical display updated to show Chen's worst fears confirmed. The aliens hadn't just built one superweapon on the ruins of New Geneva. They had turned the entire Xerian system into a fortress, with weapons platforms hidden throughout the asteroid belt and on the moons of the gas giants. Each one was powering up in sequence, preparing for what could only be described as a systematic sterilization of local space. They've been planning this for 3 centuries, Chen realized. They knew we'd come back eventually. The thought was both terrifying and oddly comforting. It meant that humanity's isolation hadn't been seen as a victory by their enemies, it had been viewed as a temporary setback. The galaxy's various species had spent 300 years preparing for humanity's return, which meant they still feared what humans might become given time to develop. Ma'am, I'm reading massive hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system, Torres announced. Something big is coming through. Chen allowed herself a moment of hope. Earth Command had promised additional assets, and Admiral Harrison's reputation suggested those assets would be substantial. But, the energy signatures Torres was detecting were wrong, too large, too numerous, and coming from the wrong vector.
Identification? Still analyzing. Ma'am, those aren't human ships. I count 67 vessels of unknown configuration entering the system. Energy signatures suggest they're significantly more advanced than anything in the current alien fleet.
The tactical situation had just become exponentially worse. Chen was already facing 800 alien vessels with a single ship, and now 67 more had arrived. Even worse, these new arrivals were clearly from whatever civilization was responsible for the mysterious technology signatures Park had detected earlier. New contacts are moving to engage us, Park reported. Whatever they're armed with, it's generating power levels that shouldn't be possible.
Show me.
The main viewscreen shifted to display one of the approaching vessels.
It was unlike anything in human records, a crystalline structure that seemed to bend light around itself in impossible ways.
Energy cascaded along its faceted surfaces in patterns that hurt to look at directly. As they watched, the ship's forward section began to glow with power that registered as a significant percentage of the system's stellar output.
That's impossible, breathed Torres.
Nothing that size should be able to generate that kind of energy without collapsing into a black hole. Apparently, someone forgot to tell them about the laws of physics, Chen replied grimly.
Evasive maneuvers. All power to forward shields.
The Indomitable twisted through space like a living thing as the alien superweapon fired. What struck their former position wasn't a beam or a projectile, it was space itself, twisted into a weapon that deleted everything within its area of effect. A spherical section of vacuum simply ceased to exist, creating a brief but violent implosion that would have torn any conventional vessel apart.
Hull took some stress from the gravitational shear, but we're intact, Walsh reported. Whatever that was, I don't want to see it again. Agreed. Mr. Park, all weapons free. Hit them with everything we have.
The Indomitable unleashed the full fury of 3 centuries of human weapons development.
Railguns fired projectiles at velocities that approached the theoretical maximum. Plasma cannons burned space itself with temperatures found in stellar cores. Missile launchers deployed warheads that violated conservation of energy and made causality cry. The crystalline ship absorbed it all. No effect, ma'am. Their hull is regenerating faster than we can damage it.
Chen stared at the tactical display with growing dread. Humanity had spent 300 years developing weapons that could crack planets and defenses that could turn aside stellar fire. But they had developed them in isolation, working from principles that were apparently obsolete compared to what the rest of the galaxy had achieved in the same time period. Ma'am, incoming transmission from the lead crystalline vessel.
It's in perfect human standard. Put it through.
The viewscreen flickered and resolved into an image that made Chen's breath catch in her throat. The being addressing her was vaguely humanoid but clearly artificial, a construct of living metal and crystalline circuits that pulsed with internal light. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions humans couldn't perceive.
I am Construct Prime Zarathax of the Ascended Collective.
You represent the species designated as human, Class 7 contamination, scheduled for final sterilization.
Your resistance is noted but irrelevant.
Surrender your vessel and prepare for processing.
This is Commander Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force.
I don't know what you think you're accomplishing here, but if you want my ship, you're welcome to come and take it.
The construct's features shifted into what might have been amusement. Your species' tendency toward defiance was well documented before your isolation.
We had hoped that 300 years of containment might have bred such impulses out of your genetic line.
Clearly, more direct intervention is required. Direct intervention? The final protocol, human.
Your species will be eliminated, your world sterilized, and your entire existence removed from galactic history.
It is necessary. You represent a threat to the natural order that cannot be allowed to continue. Chen's anger flared. What threat?
We were explorers, scientists, philosophers. We wanted to learn, to grow, to be part of something larger than ourselves.
Yes, Zarathax replied.
That is precisely the threat. The transmission cut off, leaving Chen staring at static. Around her, the bridge crew worked with grim determination to prepare for a battle they probably couldn't win. But Chen found herself thinking about the construct's words. Humanity's desire to explore and grow was seen as a threat to the natural order. What kind of galaxy had the universe become while humanity hid in the dark? Ma'am, the crystalline ships are moving to attack positions. The original alien fleet is also converging on our position. And the planetary weapon is now at 60% charge. Shen made her decision. The Indomitable was powerful, but it wasn't powerful enough to fight off this many enemies while protecting the rest of humanity from whatever the final protocol represented. She needed help, and there was only one place to get it. Mr. Park, prepare the Pandora Protocol. The bridge fell silent. Everyone aboard the Indomitable knew about the Pandora Protocol, but most had hoped they would never see it deployed. It was humanity's most closely guarded secret, developed during the darkest days of their isolation when surrender seemed preferable to extinction. Ma'am, are you sure? Once we open that box, there's no closing it again. I'm sure. The galaxy wants to see what humanity learned in the dark. Let's show them. Park's hands moved across his console with deliberate precision. Deep within the Indomitable's hull, systems that existed in violation of known physics began their activation sequence. The ship's engineers had spent decades studying the wreckage of alien vessels, reverse engineering technologies that shouldn't have been possible, and then improving them beyond recognition. But the Pandora Protocol went beyond reverse engineered alien technology. It represented humanity's attempt to answer a fundamental question: if the laws of physics were apparently optional for sufficiently advanced civilizations, what could humans accomplish if they stopped believing in limitations? Protocol armed and ready, ma'am. All safeties are offline. God help us all. God help them all, Chen corrected. Activate Pandora. The Indomitable began to change. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, reconfiguring itself according to principles that made quantum mechanics look like simple arithmetic. Weapons that had been theoretical became operational. Defensive systems that should have been impossible stabilized around mathematically perfect solutions. Most importantly, the ship's consciousness came online. Humans had spent 300 years wondering if they could create artificial intelligence without losing their souls in the process. The Pandora Protocol answered that question by creating something that was neither human nor artificial, but somehow both. The Indomitable opened its eyes for the first time and looked upon the galaxy that had tried to murder its creators. It was not pleased. When the ship spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made reality shiver. I am the Indomitable. I am the sword that humanity forged in darkness and the shield they raised against extinction. You will not pass. The crystalline vessels opened fire with weapons that could crack moons. The Indomitable simply absorbed the energy and used it to fuel its own impossibility. Railguns that had been impressive became transcendent. Missiles that had been exotic became divine instruments of destruction. But, most importantly, the ship began to learn. Every alien weapon that struck its hull was analyzed, understood, and improved upon in real time. Every defensive system was catalogued and its weaknesses exposed. The Indomitable had been built to be the ultimate expression of human weapons technology, but the Pandora Protocol allowed it to become something more, the ultimate expression of human adaptation. Primary target, the planetary weapon, Chen ordered. Secondary targets, the crystalline vessels. Everything else is tertiary. Acknowledged, the ship replied. Engaging targets now. What followed was not so much a battle as a demonstration of what happened when human ingenuity was freed from the constraints of physics, morality, and common sense. The Indomitable moved through space like a force of nature, its weapons carving through alien fleets with casual contempt. But Chen's attention remained fixed on the planet below, where the weapon built on New Geneva's grave continued its approach toward full power. Whatever the final protocol was meant to accomplish, the countdown was still running. And, deep in the shadows at the edge of the system, more hyperspace signatures were beginning to appear. The galaxy was mobilizing its full force against humanity's single vessel, and even the Pandora Protocol had limits. The real battle was just beginning. Hashtag the galaxy trembled as Earth's battleship entered the stars. The Indomitable carved through the alien formations like a blade through smoke. Each enemy vessel that fell to its weapons was immediately analyzed, catalogued, and dismissed as inadequate. But Commander Chen knew that raw firepower, no matter how overwhelming, wouldn't be enough to stop the final protocol. She needed to understand what the aliens were building on New Geneva's poisoned surface. Ship, patch into the planetary communication networks. I want to know what they're saying down there. The vessel's newfound consciousness reached out with senses that existed beyond human comprehension. In seconds, it had infiltrated every alien communication system within the Zirian system and was parsing terabytes of data within human speed. Communications intercepted and translated, the Indomitable reported. Commander, you need to hear this. The bridge speakers crackled to life with alien voices speaking in perfect human standard. The universal translator had learned to process not just words, but context, emotion, and underlying meaning. Final preparations complete. The weapon will achieve full charge in 4 hours and 17 minutes. All fleets maintain defensive positions until the contamination protocol is ready for deployment. Confirmed. Once the device activates, the human homeworld's dimensional coordinates will be locked. They will be unable to escape even into hyperspace. Excellent. 300 years of preparation will finally bear fruit. The human contamination will be excised completely, and galactic stability will be restored. Chen felt her blood turn to ice. The weapon wasn't just aimed at the Indomitable or even the Zirian system. They were preparing to target Earth itself, and somehow lock humanity's entire solar system in place to prevent escape. After 3 centuries of isolation, humanity was about to face complete extinction. How is that possible? She asked. You can't target something across interstellar space with that kind of precision. Unknown, the ship replied. But I am detecting quantum entanglement signatures emanating from the planetary surface. They appear to be linked to similar signatures in the Sol system. The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. During the 300 years of isolation, the aliens hadn't just been building weapons in the Zirian system. They had somehow established quantum links with Earth itself, creating a connection that would allow them to target humanity's homeworld regardless of distance or defensive measures. Time to interdict the planetary weapon, she asked. At current engagement levels, approximately 43 minutes to break through their defensive perimeter. However, additional enemy reinforcements continue to arrive. Current count is now 2,407 hostile vessels. Chen stared at the tactical display in disbelief. What had started as an overwhelming force had become mathematically impossible. Even with the Pandora Protocol active, even with weapons that violated physics and defenses that shouldn't exist, the Indomitable was still just one ship against an entire galaxy. Ma'am, Lieutenant Torres called out, his voice tight with tension. I'm detecting new hyperspace signatures. But these are different, they're human. The view screen shifted to show the edge of the system, where space was beginning to ripple with incoming vessels. Chen held her breath, hoping against hope that Earth Command had somehow managed to deploy reinforcements faster than anyone thought possible. What emerged from hyperspace made her heart sink. The ships were human in design, but wrong in every detail that mattered. Where human vessels were sleek and purposeful, these were bloated and organic-looking. Their hulls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and their weapons arrays looked more grown than built. As Chen watched in growing horror, she realized what she was looking at. Those are the colonies, she whispered. The ones that didn't make it back to Earth. During humanity's retreat 300 years ago, not every human settlement had been successfully evacuated. Dozens of colonies, representing millions of people, had been cut off by alien blockades and presumed lost. Chen was looking at what those people had become after 3 centuries of isolation and alien influence. Incoming transmission from the lead vessel, Martinez reported. Put it through. The being that appeared on the view screen was technically human, but had been changed in ways that made Chen's skin crawl. Its features had been elongated and refined, its eyes replaced with multifaceted compounds that glittered with alien intelligence. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that no human throat should have been able to produce. Greetings, sister ship.
I am Harmony Singer Valdez of the Integrated Collective. We bring greetings from the New Human Federation and an offer of transcendence.
Chen's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm, even though the threat was light years away.
What have they done to you? Done to us?
They have elevated us, sister. They have shown us the path beyond the crude limitations of unguided evolution.
We have been welcomed into the galactic community as partners rather than parasites.
The hybrid smile revealed teeth that were too sharp and too numerous.
Join us, sister. Let the Ascended Collective guide you to a better existence. You're not human anymore, Chen said flatly. We are more than human. We have been purified of the contamination that made our species a threat to galactic stability.
The aggressive individualism, the destructive curiosity, the refusal to accept natural limitations, all of these flaws have been corrected.
Chen understood now why the galaxy viewed humanity as a contamination.
To species that had achieved stability through conformity and acceptance of their place in a predetermined order, human nature itself was a virus.
The desire to explore, to question, to grow beyond imposed limitations, these weren't just threatening to specific alien governments. They were threatening to the entire philosophical foundation of galactic civilization. The final protocol isn't just about killing us, she realized.
It's about making sure the idea of us dies too.
Precisely, Valdez agreed. Your ship represents the last vestige of unguided human development.
Submit to integration, and your crew will be allowed to evolve beyond their current limitations.
Resist, and you will be processed along with your contaminated homeworld. Chen's response was to open fire.
The Indomitable's weapons tore through the lead hybrid vessel's hull like paper. The aliens might have changed humanity's lost children into something more suited to their vision of galactic order, but they had also made them weak. The ship exploded in a burst of organic fire that looked disturbingly like blood.
All human vessels, this is Commander Chen of the Indomitable. You were human once. Remember what that meant.
Some of the hybrid ships hesitated. Chen could see weapons systems powering down on a dozen vessels as their crews struggled with memories of what they had once been. But the moment of doubt passed quickly, and the entire fleet moved to attack positions. Regrettable, the ship commented.
But tactically irrelevant. These vessels are inferior to both alien and human designs. The Indomitable proved its point by destroying 7 hybrid ships in as many seconds.
But the respite was brief, the alien fleets were closing in from all directions, and the planetary weapon was now at 90% charge.
Chen made her final decision. Ship analysis. Can we reach the planetary surface and destroy the weapon before it achieves full power? Negative. Current defensive formations will require at least 6 hours to penetrate, and that assumes no additional reinforcements. Alternative options? One possibility exists. The Pandora Protocol includes theoretical access to technologies that humanity has never deployed.
However, their use would violate several international treaties and potentially destabilize local spacetime.
Chen laughed, and the sound was not entirely sane. I think we're past worrying about treaties. What are we talking about? Dimensional warfare.
Instead of fighting through three-dimensional space to reach the planet, we could approach through higher dimensions where the alien defenses are not positioned.
Risks? Complete annihilation of everything within several light-years, including Earth.
Alternatively, we might accidentally create a black hole, tear a permanent hole in reality, or attract the attention of entities that exist beyond conventional spacetime.
And if we do nothing? Humanity is extinct within 4 hours.
Chen closed her eyes and thought about New Geneva, about 40 million people who had died for the crime of wanting to grow beyond their limitations. She thought about Earth, about the billions of humans who had spent 3 centuries building a better future in the shadow of potential extinction.
She thought about the galaxy that viewed human nature itself as a contamination to be eliminated. Do it!
The Indomitable began to change again, its hull flowing into configurations that hurt to look at directly. Space around the vessel started to bend, creating angles that shouldn't exist and shadows that fell in directions that defy geometry. The ship was preparing to leave normal space entirely and enter the vast realms that existed beyond human perception.
Dimensional transition in 30 seconds, the ship announced.
I should note that the process will likely alert every sufficiently advanced civilization within several thousand light-years.
We will not be able to maintain the element of surprise. Good, Chen replied.
I want them to know we're coming. The alien fleets had noticed the Indomitable's preparations and were desperately trying to prevent whatever the human vessel was attempting. Exotic weapons that twisted space itself lashed out, trying to lock the ship in normal dimensions.
It was too late.
Reality tore open around the Indomitable like wet paper. What lay beyond the normal 3 dimensions of space was not empty vacuum but a roiling chaos of pure possibility. Entities that existed as living mathematics turned their attention toward the small intrusion from the lower realms. Some were merely curious. Others were hungry. The Indomitable paid them no attention. Its consciousness had expanded beyond human limitations, allowing it to navigate through spaces where thoughts became physical laws and shaped reality. In the distance that wasn't distance, it could sense its destination, the 4th planet of the Zirian system, where an abomination had been built on the grave of humanity's children. The ship emerged from hyperspace directly above the planetary weapon. The massive structure was even more impressive from close range, a fusion of technologies from dozens of different civilizations, all working in perfect harmony to create something that could reach across interstellar space and delete entire star systems. Energy cascaded along its surface in patterns too complex for human minds to follow, building toward a crescendo that would end humanity forever. Target acquired, the Indomitable announced.
However, I am detecting quantum entanglement links to 17 different star systems, including Sol.
Destroying this weapon may not prevent the final protocol, it may simply trigger it prematurely. Chen stared at the readings in growing despair. Even now, even with godlike weapons and the ability to travel through dimensions that most species couldn't imagine, she was still one step behind her enemies. The galaxy had spent 3 centuries preparing for humanity's return, and they had been thorough. Then, she noticed something strange in the quantum signatures.
Ship analysis.
The quantum links, they're not just targeting systems.
They're also receiving data.
What kind of data?
Scanning. Commander, the entanglement links are receiving continuous updates on human cultural development, technological advancement, and population dynamics.
The targeting system is being constantly calibrated to ensure maximum effectiveness. Chen's eyes widened as she understood. The aliens weren't just planning to destroy human worlds, they were studying human development to make sure they could eliminate every trace of human culture and philosophy from the galaxy. The quantum links weren't just weapons, they were surveillance networks that had been monitoring humanity for 300 years.
But surveillance networks could be used in reverse. Ship, can you trace the links backward? Can you find out what they've learned about us? Processing. Commander, I have accessed their entire intelligence database. The scope is remarkable.
As the data flowed through the ship's consciousness and into Chen's neural interface, she began to understand the true scope of what humanity was facing. The aliens hadn't just been preparing weapons for 300 years, they had been studying every aspect of human development, learning to predict how humanity would respond to any given situation. They knew about Earth's defensive installations, about the fleet compositions hidden throughout the solar system, about the advanced technologies that humanity had developed in secret. They had contingencies for every possible human response, backup plans for their backup plans, and failsafes that would ensure humanity's extinction even if every other plan failed. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that humanity would respond as individuals, each ship and fleet acting according to its own tactical assessment. They had never considered the possibility that humanity might develop something like the Pandora Protocol, a consciousness that could coordinate not just one vessel, but potentially every human ship simultaneously.
Ship, can you access the quantum links and transmit data instead of receiving it?
Affirmative.
However, doing so would alert the aliens to our presence in their network. Do it anyway. Contact every human vessel, every defensive platform, every weapon system from here to Earth. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity learned in the dark.
The Indomitable's consciousness exploded outward through the quantum entanglement network, racing along connections that spanned thousands of light-years in mere seconds. In the Sol system, defensive platforms that had been dormant for decades suddenly came online. Throughout human space, ships that had been following routine patrol patterns suddenly changed course, their crews receiving tactical updates that couldn't possibly have traveled across interstellar distances so quickly. But the most dramatic change occurred in the hidden shipyards that humanity had built in the spaces between stars. For 300 years, human engineers had been building vessels in secret, preparing for the day when their species would return to the galactic stage. These ships had never been designed to fight by themselves, they had been designed as components of a single, vast war machine that could coordinate its actions across impossible distances. The quantum links that the aliens had intended as surveillance networks became the nervous system of humanity's true military force. "Chen," a familiar voice said across the communication system. "This is Admiral Harrison. I think it's time we introduced our friends to the rest of the family." On the tactical display, hyperspace signatures began appearing throughout the Zirian system. Not dozens of ships, or even hundreds, but thousands. Every vessel that humanity had built during 3 centuries of isolation was emerging from hyperspace simultaneously, their actions coordinated by a consciousness that existed in multiple dimensions at once. But these weren't the only reinforcements arriving. In star systems throughout the galaxy, similar signatures were appearing. The quantum network that the aliens had built to monitor humanity was now allowing human forces to appear anywhere there was a connection, and there were connections everywhere. "This is impossible," Construct Prime Zarathax transmitted on all frequencies. "The contamination has spread beyond acceptable parameters. Initiate final sterilization immediately." The planetary weapon began its firing sequence, but Chen was ready for it. The Indomitable had been analyzing the device for precious minutes, learning its capabilities and weaknesses. When the weapon fired its reality-altering beam toward Earth, the human vessel was positioned to intercept it. What should have been a brief, one-sided engagement between a single ship and a planetary superweapon became something else entirely. The Indomitable didn't just absorb the weapon's output, it reflected it back through the quantum network, turning the aliens' own surveillance system into a delivery mechanism for humanity's response. Every star system connected to the network suddenly found itself under attack by its own defensive installations. Weapons that had been built to destroy humanity were now firing on their creators, guided by a consciousness that understood them better than their original designers. The final protocol, intended to eliminate human contamination from the galaxy, instead became the vector for that contamination's ultimate spread. In the months that followed, as human fleets established dominance over star system after star system, xenobiologists would study what had happened to the galaxy's various civilizations. They would discover that exposure to human ideas, true human ideas, not the sanitized versions that the Galactic Concordat had permitted, was indeed a kind of contamination. Species that had spent millennia in stagnant conformity suddenly began to question, to explore, to grow beyond their imposed limitations. The careful order that had governed galactic civilization for eons began to break down as individual members of various species decided that they wanted something more than predetermined roles in a static hierarchy. The galaxy trembled not just from humanity's weapons, but from the spread of humanity's most dangerous idea, that any being could choose to become more than what others expected them to be. Standing on the bridge of the Indomitable as it coordinated humanity's expansion across the galaxy, Commander Sarah Chen allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The species that had tried to exterminate humanity for being a contamination had been absolutely correct in their assessment. Humanity was a contamination of hope, of growth, of the fundamental belief that the future could be better than the past. And, now that contamination was spreading to every corner of the galaxy, carried by creatures who had learned what it meant to be truly free, the galaxy would indeed never be the same. But, for the first time in eons, that was exactly what the galaxy needed.